Welcome to the last section of our course. In this section, we'll first explore a high-level Keras functional API and then move towards 3 deep learning mini projects. So let's get started. In this video, we'll be learning about TensorFlow 2.0 high-level API and Keras-API. Let's talk about the high-level functional API. A sequential model is a simple stack of layers that cannot represent arbitrary models. More advanced models can be built using the functional API. Functional API enables you to define complex topologies, include multi-input and multi-output models, models with shared layers, and models with residual connections. So let's get our hands dirty with the code. TensorFlow Keras functional API. When building models with functional API, layers are callable on a tensor and return a tensor as output. These input tensors and output tensors can then be used to define a model. Let's get started by importing the libraries. I'm importing TensorFlow STF and then I'll be importing layers and activations from TensorFlow Keras. So let's go ahead and run this. Next, I'm creating an input layer and I want this layer to possess 32 neurons. The layer would be stored in this input object. A layer instance is callable on a tensor and returns a tensor. I'm passing the input layer to the layer we have just created over here. We are creating a hidden layer with 64 neurons and ReLU as an activation function. Also note that we are passing the previously created input layer to this layer as an input parameter. This layer would return a hidden layer and will pass the hidden layer as an input to the next layer. It's an identical layer to the previous one. The output of this layer will be stored in this hidden object. Next, we'll be creating our final layer with 10 neurons and softmax as an activation function. Also, note that we are passing the hidden layer as an input to this layer, and the output of this last layer would be stored in the object of this prediction. So let's run all of these blocks. Now let's use TensorFlow Keras model to create a model. This would be inputs and outputs. These are the objects that we have already created earlier. The model would be stored into this model object. So let's go ahead and run this. Now let's go ahead and print the summary of the model. So as you can see, it has 32 neurons in the input layer, 64 in the hidden layer and 64 in the next hidden layer, and 10 neurons in the last output layer. The entire model has got above 6,000 parameters. Fully customizable models can be built by using the model subclass API. You define your own forward pass imperatively in this style in the body of the class method. We'll be creating a class myModel and will pass the model object in the constructor. We are defining the layers and there is other function with the name call. This would take inputs as an input argument. We'll pass that input objects through a couple of dense layers and then return the results. So I hope you have got an idea how you can create your own custom model using functional API.